Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the dyslexiaconnect.com dyslexia blog. In the previous episode I was talking about common symptoms and signs of dyslexia, and as I mentioned in that episode there are so many signs and symptoms of dyslexia that I'm splitting this up into two parts. So in the last one we talked about some of the major signs of dyslexia in terms of reading, and today we're going to finish that up and talk about the other major signs of dyslexia when we're talking about reading. So let's pick up where we left off. Another major sign of dyslexia in terms of reading is when comprehension is very difficult for a student. Now, this is caused by several different things. First of all, of course, if a child is dyslexic, reading may be very difficult and tiring for them, as I mentioned last time. As a result, they tend to breeze through things, not necessarily read them carefully, not want to read things. This can cause problems with comprehension. Also, of course, as mentioned last time, reading accuracy is an issue. If reading accuracy is an issue, it doesn't simply make it difficult for a person who's listening to understand what is being said when the dyslexic student is reading, or the dyslexic student to, I guess, understand their own sentences, but it also makes comprehension really difficult. If a dyslexic student is misreading things constantly, they're really not getting a good idea of what they're reading and comprehending what they're reading. And this problem with comprehension tends to get worse as a child gets older if they haven't had their dyslexic issues addressed and gotten the proper dyslexia tutoring that they need. Because the material that they see in school tends to get more complex and more difficult as they go on. So reading accuracy issues are a problem, of course, in first grade, second grade, third grade, but as that material increases in difficulty, it even becomes more of an issue because they start missing nuanced meanings in the paragraphs they're reading and really not understanding complex material well. And so their comprehension tends to get worse and worse as they go on if that issue is not addressed. Something else we see really common that is a major sign of dyslexia is when somebody substitutes words. So, for example, we may be having them read something and they'll substitute a synonym that means the same thing but isn't actually the word that's written on the page. For example, if a student was reading the sentence, "The job was very hard," they may read it as "the job was very difficult," and they would insert the word difficult for hard. What's particularly interesting about this symptom is that we often see dyslexics inserting more difficult words for the ones that are actually on the page. And this is very curious because it seems to indicate that the dyslexic student recognizes sort of what the meaning is supposed to be there by context, but their brain is inserting a synonym instead of the word itself. Now, some people might say, well, this isn't too much of an issue, but actually it does become a problem because as material gets more difficult and more complex that they're reading, those little variations can cause a big difference in their reading comprehension. So it's really important to get them reading the actual word on the page and not inserting synonyms when they read that. But that's a very, very curious symptom that we tend to see a lot with dyslexic students. Another thing we often see is that they will leave the ends off of words, or they might change the ending of a word. So for example, if they're reading the word singing, they might just read it as sing. Or if they're reading the sentence like, "all my friends were singing," they might just read it as "all my friends were sing," and leaving off the ing. That is very, very common, changing the endings of words, changing the conjugations of verbs like that. Also, dyslexics tend to leave S's off of plurals or add S's in where they don't belong. They might be going along and say, "the person saw a lot of birds," but instead they'll read it as "the person saw a lot of bird," and they won't necessarily recognize it even though they just misread that. Another very common thing is when we see them leaving out small words, prepositions, different words like at, for, from, of. They tend to leave these out a lot when they read sentences, and so the sentence will sound pretty close to accurate, but not really. There'll be things clearly missing and it won't sound right to anybody that's listening to them. If they're not leaving words out like that, they may be actually inserting these little words into sentences where they don't belong. So they may be putting the word oven where it doesn't belong, at, is, and it's going to once again change the meaning of the sentence and give them poorer comprehension when they're reading. That is a very, very common one. Another symptom, of course, is just guessing at words. Dyslexics, of course, have a lot of trouble reading until they get dyslexia tutoring and dyslexia therapy. So as a result, they develop a coping mechanism and they guess at words all the time. So they may be going along and they'll read a sentence that's 10 words long, but they will misread 3 of them, 2 or 3 of them, and just guess at the meaning of that word, the pronunciation, since they don't want to go ahead and take the time to actually sound it out. This is extremely common. This is a very negative effect on reading comprehension. And in fact, with our online dyslexia tutoring program, this is one of the things that we work on a lot because it's very important to break that bad habit of guessing at words so that a student can become a better reader and a better speller. So we work on this a lot, and sometimes it's become a habit that's so ingrained that it takes a decent amount of time to break this habit. Finally, one of the other major signs of dyslexia is if a child is obviously of average intelligence or above, but is just simply having a lot of trouble with reading and spelling. So if a student seems smart and seems bright and they're engaged in a lot of different areas, but they just seem to have trouble reading and spelling and it doesn't make much sense according to their intelligence level, this is a very common sign of dyslexia. And this is something that it takes a little while to learn how to recognize this, but we see this in a lot of our students. A lot of our students in our tutoring program are very bright, and it's obvious when we sit down with them, even before they display these other signs of dyslexia, that they're obviously dyslexic because they're very bright, but they're having trouble reading and spelling, and there's obviously something going on. And then they usually start to show some of the other symptoms and signs of dyslexia as well, and it becomes very, very obvious at that point. So, those are some additional signs of dyslexia in terms of reading. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, we don't always see all of these in each dyslexic student. Dyslexia comes in varying degrees with various symptoms. You may see a couple ones with this student, a few different ones with another student, and it's very important to understand that because not every dyslexic is going to display all of these dyslexic signs. So I hope that this was informative for you. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those here. Or you can also go on to you can leave them on the YouTube comment section or go to our website, dyslexiaconnect.com, and send us an email or comment in our video blog section there. And we're always happy to answer questions. You can also find information about our online dyslexia tutoring program at our website. And once again, that's www.dyslexiaconnect.com. See you next time.